time of the year. Of course, the race is, 52nd race is coming up here in just a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks. So. I'm going to tell you, just talk a little bit about what the Birkie is to start off, and then get into the history of it a little bit, and how I ended up doing the book, and kind of what some of the key things are in the book. So, yeah, American Birkebeiner, established in 1973, currently goes from Cable to Hayward, but it has gone back and forth over the years. So, originally it started off going from Hayward to Cable. That's the book, and so how did I end up writing this book? Well, as Anton said, I've been a long-time journalist. I've skied the Birkie for many years, and reported on it for many years. I actually saw the Birkie for the first time in 1982 as a reporter, and was kind of enthralled by it. So that's going way back to the early days. It was the 10th annual race, and I had grown up around traditional sports: baseball, basketball, football, golf. And suddenly I was exposed to this whole new world of athletics, cross-country skiing, one that I really had. I'd been on skis a couple times in my life at that point. And all of a sudden I'm seeing this incredible event. Thousands of skiers coming down the main street of Hayward. At that time, they actually started the race on Hayward for the first time, coming down Main Street. I was just kind of shocked by the beauty of it, the pageantry of it, and the pure physical challenge of these skiers going 30 plus miles through the hills, the north woods of Wisconsin. It just really kind of took me. It took me 4 years actually to end up skiing the race at the Port Lopet, and then another few years after writing about it to end up skiing the race regularly, but and then started reporting on it year after year after year for the newspaper where I worked. So I had that sort of double exposure to the race as a skier, but also as a journalist, and writing about the top-notch skiers who were part of it. So that's partly how I ended up doing the book, because I knew so much about it. But I would argue that I knew maybe 5% of what I ended up writing, because it took about 4+ years of work, 60+ interviews, archival research, resulting in a 10-chapter book that covers 50 years of Birkie history in 5 chronological chapters, but also has 5 other chapters by subject, and we're going to talk about those a little bit. That's me in the foreground, coming up Main Street a few years ago, finishing one of my Birkies. So, book was published by the Wisconsin Historical Society Press, kind of the counterpart to the Minnesota Historical Society Press. Separate institutions, but they are interested in Wisconsin history, and this truly is a classic Wisconsin event. So I was lucky to have a publisher that really cared about this subject and is actually donating some of the proceeds back to the American Birkebeiner Ski Foundation. So really a cool thing to see that. So, in a sense, to me, the Birkebeiner was a Bookebeiner in a sense, because the 4+ years of work and all of that time I put into it. As you can see that I talked about there. Yeah, it was a long process of research, writing, editing, getting the photos picked out. So what is the Birkie? Some of you may not be totally familiar about it. Cross-country ski race from Cable to Hayward, always the 3rd Saturday in February. The 52nd annual coming up here in 2.5 weeks. And it's sold out. You couldn't even enter the Birkie right now because it is totally full of skiers. And that's an amazing thing. 10,000+ skiers. It's probably maybe even closer to 12,000 between the Birkie and the half Birkie called the Port Lopet.
But the half Birkebeiner.
The half Birkebeiner, correct. A lot of people call it the Birkie, but the real name is the Birkebeiner. 10,000+ skiers, about 20,000 spectators on Main Street, and up to 2,000 volunteers. And the main skate race is 50 kilometers, then you got 53 classic, 29 Port Lopet. So you're talking about 31 miles for the skate, 33 for the classic, and about 18 or 19 for the Port Lopet. So that's a long ways to ski, longer than a running marathon even. Skiers from 45+ states, quite often 49 states, and 20 to 25 countries. It's a big event. And as you know, highly competitive event. I mean, the skiers who win this race look like this. They're thin, they're strong, they're incredibly fit. They can go the 31 miles in a little over 2 hours. It's averaging about 15 miles an hour on skis with a lot of hills. So really, really fit people that are doing the race, including, as you can see, the finish on Main Street here. Some of the skiers still have the ability to sprint up Main Street even after skiing 30 miles. And then we have the Birkie always has Olympic level skiers. In 2024, the winner was Jessie Diggins, of course, Minnesota's incredible Olympic star. She came to the Birkie and won it in 2024. Most of the winners of the Birkie are not current Olympians. They tend to be Olympians either on the way up to the Olympic level, or maybe have been Olympians and are maybe on the way down, or maybe they just missed their Olympic team and then they come and do the Birkie. So the Birkie doesn't get current Olympians, but they get everybody who's around that level. So a highly competitive race, but it's also a citizen race for skiers from ages 18 all the way up to 80 plus. This young lady here just finished, as you can see on her left shoulder, her 30th Birkie, still going strong. I mean, it's a great lifetime sport. You can ski. I was out skiing at our local trails the other day and ran into a woman that I've seen out there for years, and I know she's over 90 years old. She's still on her skis. It's an amazing lifetime sport, great physical activity. When you're skiing the Birkie, you're going to start off in a wave, probably 600 to 700 skiers in your wave. This is one of those waves. It looks like the fourth wave. Everybody's wearing a green bib because you get a specific bib for your wave. But when you start off, it's really crowded. You're skiing tip to tip with all of your best Nordic friends for 5-10 kilometers or more before it starts to spread out. So it's a little claustrophobic at start. You just want to stay on your feet. Pretty wild race. But Birkie's more than just the Birkebeiner on Saturday. It's a whole week of cool events. You have the Bonner Birkie Kids Race on Thursday that gets quite often 1,000 or more kids from ages 3 to 12. These are the future Birkebeiner skiers. There's several Olympians that started the Birkie as Bonner Birkie skiers. That's where they began their Birkie journey. There's an event on Thursday night called the Giant Ski. I think it's basically the Birkebeiner's version of the gunny sack race. If you don't coordinate your movements on those two giant skis with your partners, all 6 of you go down at once, and good luck getting up. It's a fun event, though. It's just part of the festive atmosphere of the Birkie. Also, there's another picture from the giant ski, a couple of guys having a good time. Why is it called the Birkebeiner? It's patterned after the Norwegian Birkebeiner Rene, which was established in 1932. And it celebrates the rescue of baby Prince Haakon by warriors on skis in 1206, in the midst of the Civil War. Prince Haakon went on to become one of the famous kings of Norway, and probably considered one of the greatest kings of Norway at a time when the country was just forming. So he's considered one of the legends of Norway. And his rescue, of course, was part of the reason why why Norway became so famous, because he was saved from the Civil War. The Birkie has reenactors every year, and they have to actually apply to do this, and they represent the 2 skiing warriors and the mother of Prince Haakon, and they ski the Birkie course kind of as ambassadors, and they're out there having a good time taking pictures, and you can see on their legs they have birch bark on their legs, and that's what Birkebeiner means. It means birch bindings in Norwegian. So the skiing warriors way back when had to put birch bindings on their legs to help them ski through the forest. Okay, established 1973. How did the Birkie begin and why? Part of my research delved into, I had a whole chapter about the first Birkie, and dug into how the race began and what were the factors that caused the race to begin. There was really, pre-1960, cross-country skiing barely even existed in the United States. And we may think of it now as a really fairly popular sport, especially here in Minnesota and Wisconsin and many other states, Michigan, the Northeast, Alaska, Colorado. But prior to that time, prior to 1960, most of the people skiing were the children of immigrants, or the immigrants, Scandinavian immigrants, Norwegians, Germans, Finnish people. But mid-1960s, John F. Kennedy wanted Americans to get more fit. all of a sudden fitness started taking off in the mid-60s. Environmentalism started taking off in the mid-1960s. And other factors, there was this counterculture movement along with the hippie sort of movement, Bob Dylan songs, all of that. Suddenly the idea of skiing through the woods in like in a wool sweater was kind of a cool thing. It wasn't really before then. There really were no trails, there was very little grooming. The skis were wood skis. Now we have, that hadn't really developed into the modern skis we have. So, along came a man named Tony Wise. I'm going to show you a picture of him here in a second. But Tony was a Hayward native, a World War II veteran, and he had an MBA from Harvard. And when he came back from World War II and finished his MBA at Harvard, he did something really unusual. He said, I'm not going to Wall Street. I'm going back to my hometown. I'm going to put it on the map. And so in 1946, he returned to Hayward and decided he was going to start an alpine skiing hill in the hills outside of Hayward up at Cable. And that became known as the Telemark Alpine Operation. 1947 is when it opened. And for 25 years, he ran a very successful alpine operation. He also had other great ideas. He was a dynamo, Tony Wise, an incredible man. He started the World Lumberjack Championships in Hayward, opened Telemark Lodge in 1972-73. And at the same time, he added some cross-country skiing trails at Telemark Lodge for the first time in the winter of 72-73. And that was essentially how the Birkie began. He had seen the growth in cross-country skiing at that time and heard that the sport was starting to take off. And he decided he needed to add cross-country skiing trails to his alpine operation, which was extremely popular and very successful. What happened, though, was somebody suggested that he start a race to actually bring more attention to his cross-country ski trails. And it certainly did, because he started not just a race, he started the American Birkebeiner the same winter that he opened this Telemark Lodge. And there's a picture of Tony standing in front of the winners, I think it was of the top 3 podium finishers, I think from 1977. So, this was an amazing thing. He not only started a ski race, and most people would have started maybe like a 10-kilometer race, few laps around the local trails, maybe up to Telemark. But Tony was a huge thinker, big idea person. And his idea was, let's do a race that's 30 miles long from Hayward to Cable through the woods. And he didn't even know at that time how he was going to get through the woods up to his lodge at Telemark. Honestly, did not know how they were going to do it. But he said, we're going to go ahead and do it. Because with Tony, this is what somebody quoted, what I put in the book, a quote from somebody else that Tony used to say to them was, the difficult we do today, the impossible may take a few days. So when you stop and think about that comment, what that meant was nothing was impossible to Tony. So starting a 30-mile race through the woods in a matter of a couple of months, and putting together a cobbled together trail, that wasn't impossible to Tony. We're going to get it done. He was Nike before Nike, just do it. He just went ahead and got things done because he was used to it. He'd come out of World War II from an engineering company where, for example, they might have had a bridge blown up and they had to rebuild the bridge in 2 or 3 days so that the tanks could go over the river and free a prisoner of war camp. They did that kind of stuff all the time when he was in World War II. First race, 1973, a total of 54 skiers, and just 35 in the Birkie and another 19 in the Quarter Open, which was the half race. And you can see the starting line here. That was the entire Birkie right there. Started on the Lumberjack Bowl on a little frozen pond. Off to the side, we had maybe 100 spectators. Pretty small event that first year. And the trail the first year was not a good trail. Basically, it was 2 guys who went out on snowmobiles and figured out how to get from Hayward to Cable by going down back roads, railroad ditches, logging roads, and they connected them all with little ribbons so that when the skiers got to an intersection, they saw a ribbon that said, okay, you go left or you go right. And they just cobbled together a trail. So By the third year of the race, they had about 300 skiers. But you can still see pretty lonely trail, not a lot of people out there, and it was not it's still using this original trail. But then, how did it grow? Nine years after that, 1984, this is what the starting line looked like at the Birkie. Incredible growth in a period of 9 years. And how did it happen? Let's go back to 1975 for a minute. 300 skiers in 1975. What does the big thinker Tony Wise do? He says, we're going to need a trail for thousands of skiers. He had 300 skiers, but he believed that the race was going to grow and get thousands of skiers. He was so confident that this thing was going to take off. So they started building a trail that was going to be wide enough to hold literally thousands of skiers. And by 1977, the race had grown from 300 to 2,000 skiers. And then by 84 to 8,000 skiers. One of the key things was he started bringing in international skiers. He invited skiers from Norway. He invited Olympic skiers. He started holding an event called the Gichigami Games that brought in essentially World Cup skiers, and probably the first 2 World Cup cross-country ski races ever held were at Telemark at his trails. Not on this particular trail, but on the Telemark trails. So he was a big thinker and big promoter, and he knew that if he promoted his lodge and the trails, the Birkie would grow as well. And this is a modern picture of the trail, but you can see how much wider it was. It's 30 feet wide in places now, so that original trail could hold like 1 track. Now you've got skiers that can line up 3 across or even 4 across at times. So it grew incredibly. The early years had a kind of a wild start. We went up an alpine hill and came down an alpine hill on cross-country skis, which was, got a couple of early skiers here who remember that. And it was, had to be, they only did it for 4 years because coming down that hill was not great on cross-country skis. It was really steep, and you can't control cross-country skis like you can alpine skis. They don't have the sharp edges, they're not as stable. So you can see here about half the people were on the ground. But Tony's impact, was in so many ways. Top competitors like this skier named Bill Koch. In 1975-76, the U.S. Olympic team trained at Telemark Lodge because there was no snow at Lake Placid and they needed a place to train. So think of the convergence of these things. Not only did the U.S. Olympic team train at Telemark for a couple of months and held their trials there, but this young man named Bill Koch, it was 50 years ago on Thursday, went to Austria a few weeks later and won the first medal in American Nordic skiing ever. And suddenly, cross-country skiing was on the map with a lot more people in America. Telemark was on the radar of people in America like never before because they had trained there. And the Birkebeiner became much more famous as a result. So all of this kind of came together in the late 70s and helped that race take off from a few hundred to a few thousand and suddenly 8,000 skiers. But then the Birkie hit a pretty big roadblock in 1984. Tony, being the big thinker that he was, he pushed forward so much that he got into financial difficulty. And in 1981, he actually filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy and had a chance to reorganize his debts. But then he did not make a huge enough dent in debt and went a little further in debt over the next few years. And then in 1984 was forced into Chapter 7 federal bankruptcy court and lost all of the things that he had built. He lost his Telemark Alpine operation, he lost Telemark Lodge, he lost the Lumberjack Championships, the history land that he had started, and he lost the Birkie. Tony argued that the Birkie was his intellectual property and he should have been able to keep that and still run the race. The judge disagreed, and the race was basically hanging in the balance. Nobody quite knew throughout the course of 1984 what was going to happen to the Birkie. And Tony himself wanted to start his own race that same year, but what happened was a a foundation of local people formed called the American Birkebeiner Ski Foundation. And they got the rights to run the race from the judge and created what's known today as the American Birkebeiner Ski Foundation. They raised $150,000 in a matter of about 6 months and put on the race in 1984. And that's the organization that has run the race ever since. So the Birkie took a little hit with some of its numbers for a few years, especially the 1985 race when people weren't sure if it was going to happen. But one thing that helped it kind of stabilize again and take off again, and the whole sport itself take off, was skate skiing. So most of you, or many of you, might know that the traditional form of cross-country skiing is in a set of parallel tracks called classic, or basically classic skiing, striding. But in the early to mid 1980s, Bill Koch, among other people, helped popularize this new form of skiing called skate skiing. And you can see it here where the skaters are kind of going back and forth in like an ice skating motion. And that really helped the sport take off again and grow much stronger in the late 1980s. And it helped the Birkie stabilize too and start to grow again. Another key aspect in the Birkie growth was 1992. We're going to kind of skip through a few years here, but we talked about the Main Street finish at the Birkie is really popular, but until 1992, the race had never finished on Main Street. It had started on Main Street a few times, but nobody ever thought to finish it on Main Street. And 1992 was the 20th anniversary race, and somebody on the board said, let's try finishing it on Main Street. That might be kind of cool. I dug into it a little bit, and this has become, kind of one of the iconic parts of the Birkie now, because it's been going on for 30 plus years, this Main Street finish. But the board voted 7-6 only to finish the race on Main Street. So one vote difference, and maybe we don't have the Main Street finish. And virtually all of the skiers that I talk to, and even the Olympic level skiers who come to ski the Birkie, they say the Main Street finish is considered one of the best finishes in all of cross-country skiing all over the world. They absolutely love the last finish on Main Street. And you can see in this next photo kind of what it looks like. So when you're coming to the finish of Main Street now, you come across a lake, you go up a little bridge over the highway, and as a skier, that's what you see. It's an incredible, beautiful sight if you're skiing through the woods for 31 miles, and you look down on Main Street, and it's your Olympic moment. I mean, you get to ski in front of all those people and get the cheers of all those people after skiing with just a few people in silence through the woods for hours. And you see people ringing bells and cheering, and it's really a fabulous finish to the Birkie now. But that also has truly helped the Birkie grow over the years. Skip ahead, so I think the period from roughly 1985, after Tony lost the race, from 85 to 2005, the Birkie was solid, and it was making money, it was doing okay, but nothing really changed significantly, maybe outside of that Main Street finish. But starting in 2005, there were two directors that came in, Ned Zielsdorf in 2005 to 2013, and Ben Pop from 2013 to present. But they started making changes to the race that have made it even better than ever. One of Ned's biggest things he's known for was he helped create a striding trail for half the race, a separate striding trail. What had happened was so many skaters were on the race that the striding tracks, which if you don't have a striding track and you're striding, you can't really stride. The striding track was getting chewed up by all the skaters. Somebody came to Ned with the idea, let's create a separate classic or striding trail for the first half of the race. And that's what you see there. You can see one of those classic long Birkie hills in the background. You've got striding tracks all the way across for the first half of the race. And suddenly, the number of classic skiers in the race went from 1 in 5 to about 1 in 3. The classic skiers came back to the Birkie. And they loved that, because there's an awful lot of people that love the tradition of classic skiing, even though skating probably, arguably, is more popular now. But the race started to grow again. Bigger numbers in the late 2007, 8, 9, 10. And then when Ben came in 2013, he started making additional changes to the race. they changed the bibs so that they had special cooler bibs than they used to have. These were the traditional old bibs. They're kind of a cloth, this cloth thing that went over your shoulder. You know, it was fine. We got white every year. Now you get this. Now you get a different colored bib for your wave every year, and it fits more snug over your torso. And you get a special color for your wave, and it's really a lot of fun. We're out on the course, and there's all these colors on the course. It looks so much more exciting than it used to, just in terms of how the race appears. Ben did some other things. He had some bridges on the course that hadn't been there before. He started charging to use the trail for training, and as a result, the trail got groomed better because they had more revenue. Suddenly, the trail became much more of a training destination than it had ever been in the past. And that was an incredible trail that Tony created. Hadn't probably been used to its maximum capacity until Ben started realizing if we groom it better, put more money into it, people from all over are going to come over and train on this trail. The other big thing, Telemark Lodge itself was torn down in 2019, and the Berkey Foundation bought all of that property and is redeveloping that site with some new buildings, some new attractions, mountain biking trails, other ski trails, training venues there as well. So it's become, I think, all of what Tony would have ever envisioned that it could be. You know, one of the best races in the world. It's now the third largest cross-country ski marathon in the world. And that's usually when you put the Birkey and the Port Lopet numbers together. But if you separated the Birkebeiner and the Port Lopet, they would both be, on their own, the two largest ski races in North America. They're both that many skiers. Nothing like it anywhere else. National Geographic called it one of the 10 amazing races in the world. The New York Times called it the Boston Marathon of Skiing, and just millions of dollars of impact every year up there. And there's one of the chapters I write is called Birkey Fever, and it's this just desire to come back and keep doing the Birkey year after year after year, and people just want to do it and just they want to be part of it. I'm going to read you a quote here. And I became one of those Birkey Fever people, and we've got a couple of them here today. I want to introduce you at the end as well. But So when you're on the Birkey course, part of you says, what am I doing out here? It's such a long race. It's lonely. It's hard. A lot of hills. You've got about 5,000 plus feet of climbing throughout the race. It's borderline, basically a World Cup level race course. That's a lot for average people to be skiing a World Cup level course. That's how difficult it can be if you're maybe not in great shape. But people keep coming back. I found this. One of the quotes in the book I found was actually from a fellow reporter from the Akron, Ohio Beacon Journal named Jim Quinn, who had skied the race one year, and this is what he had to say, which basically to me encapsulates what Birkebeiner fever is. Jim Quinn. The frigid wind blew snow in my face, stinging my eyes and causing icicles to form on my beard and mustache. Every muscle ached with a pain that went beyond exhaustion. Each hill seemed steeper than the last. My clothes were soaked with sweat, despite temperatures in the mid-teens. For a few minutes, a sharp pain in the fingers of my left hand told me I'd come close to frostbite. This is fun? You realize that finding the will to finish the race means reaching inside yourself for something you don't usually need and probably didn't know was there. It sounds crazy. It is crazy. There's no sane reason to get so tired, cold, and sweaty. I want to do it again. And that's kind of what happens. You're out there thinking about 38, 35 kilometers going up some of those last big hills and you think, what am I doing here? And then little by little you get a little closer and you think, Main Street, I'm going to get there. And then you get on Main Street and you think, you know, if I just trained a little more, I can do this better next year. I'm going to come back and do it again. And it just gets in your blood. That's Birkey fever. It's a passion for the race and just the joy of skiing. Here's one of the starting waves taking off, actually 2024, and that blonde ponytail to the right there in the sun is actually Jessie Diggins taking off that year on her way to winning the race. And hopefully in a few days, we'll see another Jessie Diggins medal. I think she skis Saturday, I think is her first race in the Olympics, so not quite sure, but pretty exciting. Another shot at the starting line, you can see the gun going off there. I've always felt that when I stand in the starting gate to start the Birkie, maybe one of the most exciting moments of the year for me every year. I mean, great family I love in my life, but something about standing in that Birkie starting line is just awesome. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to make it. And it's a little bit wild feeling to be skiing through the woods with thousands of people. There's crashes, all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. So I mean, it's just this moment of adventure that you're about to experience, and I think that's probably why people come back. It's an adventure. It's kind of a wild experience. So for most skiers, it really is the personal challenge. This person you're skiing right there is Caitlin Gregg. She's a Minneapolis resident. She's won more Birkies than any person in history, 5 Birkebeiner, women's Birkebeiner titles. And she has kept coming back, and is last year I think even finished in the top 5, I believe. Still is an incredible competitor. And her husband Brian Gregg, both former Olympians. And that's, if you got a beard, that's kind of what it looks like at the finish line, if it's cold enough that day. I've skied in Birkies that have started at 10 below, and I've skied in a Birkie that got to 50 degrees. You never quite know with the weather what's gonna happen. But the ice beards are a great spectacle. So the race itself is challenging for many reasons, like I said. You can see that's a classic Birkie hill there. It's about 2 or 3 levels, and it just keeps going up. Usually on the first half of the race course, the hills are the biggest, and they sort of wear you down. By midpoint, you maybe get a little bit of a breather, and if you look at the elevation map here, 5,000 feet of climbing, a little more than that for the entire race. That's a lot. You're going up at a snail's pace, and then maybe 30 seconds later, you're going 30 miles an hour on a downhill. And sometimes there's curves, and you're shoulder to shoulder with people. So it's pretty wild at times. As you can see, the elevation profile for the skate race and the classic race. Lots of big hills the first half. After the first half, you have kind of a nice gradual downhill. But then you get to the very end again, and you see those 4 big points there, those like 4 or 5 pretty big hills again at the end. Before you hit at the very, very end, that straight line is Lake Hayward. That's the only truly flat point on the entire course for any distance anyway. Like I said, you never know what the weather's going to be like. It can be sub-zero at the start. It can be too warm. Perfect day is probably about 18 or 20. I don't know who that is, actually.
I recognize him.
Oh.
Maybe you know who that is? No.
So, talk a little bit more here, and then if you have some questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But some legends of the Birkie. This young man here is Ernie St. Germain. He's the only skier who did all 50 of the first 50 races. He was considered one of the founders. There was a group of skiers who had done the first 10 skiers who had done the first 10 Birkies, and from that point on, they were considered race founders. And Ernie ended up being the last one standing. He did all 50 of the first 50 races. And this was him in 2024 when he completed his 50th. And he's been an inspiration to a lot of people, just the way he carries himself and just the special person that he is. We actually have one of the legends of the Birkie with us tonight, Jackie Linscoop.
You know, I have to confess, I think I did a Cordelovative at first 10, but I can't remember because I had knee surgery.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, I was out, 10 times.
Correct.
But I always felt guilty thinking, I think I cheated.
Well, Jackie, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jackie. It's Jackie Linscoop here, and Jackie, you live part-time in Cable and part-time here?
I know, I'm down here now.
Down here,
Because of
okay.
the Birkie, our life changed, and we lived in the Cable area for about 20 years.
Okay, yeah.
I find a lot of people, the Birkie really changes their lifestyle.
Yeah, it truly does. It's ski, run, live is the Birkie motto, and it becomes sort of your lifestyle if you
And I
get
have to
into
say
it.
too, my husband was a founder too, so.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, so Jackie and her husband Wayne were two of the first people in that original Berkey starting line of 35 ski. And Jackie was not supposed to be there. And she's been asked this many times, but the first Berkey did not allow women to ski the race. And Jackie and Wayne showed up. Jackie didn't know this because they'd seen that the race was gonna be held. And they showed up to ski. And the people at the registration desk says, women are not allowed to ski the Berkey. And that was the prevailing attitude back then, that women were not strong enough to ski 30 miles. So the Boston Marathon did not let women run the Boston Marathon at the time. There are other races. The Norwegian Birkebeiner did not allow women to ski the Norwegian Birkebeiner, basically the same distance. Jackie protested politely and said, I can ski this distance, I want to ski. And there was a little discussion behind the scenes between Tony Wise and some of the race organizers, and they sort of said, Jackie, you shouldn't be skiing this, and she said, I'm gonna ski. And they let Jackie Lindskog ski the first Berkey. And she unofficially became the first women's champion of the American Birkebeiner.
Slow skier, but I maintain and finish. What I don't understand is the second year no women entered. And the third year women from
Right.
Norway, and then that I was out skiing forever, but yeah.
So you were the women's champion the first 2 years, correct?
So, that's the way it goes.
Nobody else did. However, and you said you certainly weren't trying to prove a point, but you beat quite a number of the men that first year also, including your husband, I believe. So Jackie was a pioneer and set the example for many, many women to follow, and it's now, of course, a lot of women ski in the race and ski it incredibly fast and do really, really well. So we also have another soon-to-be Berkey legend with us, sitting right back here. His name is Steve Carmazon.
Oh, Steve.
And Steve, if all goes well, will be the second person in Berkey history in 2.5 weeks to ski 50 Berkeys. Steve just missed the first 2, correct?
Yeah,
And he's never missed one since.
Jackie and I go back a long
Yeah,
ways.
well, nice to see you. I'm glad I came.
And I'm going to introduce a third legend of the Berkey with us today. In the back row here we have, in the middle of the back row, we have Frances Wise, who is Tony Wise's daughter. Frances was there when the race began. She won the Cordelopa the second year, I believe. It's in the book, I can't remember exactly.
It's the second year.
Yeah. She was there when Telemark Lodge began. She was there when all of this began, and she could more than likely tell you more about Berkey history than Birkebeiner history. She doesn't like the term Berkey, and I agree, but it's become sort of the shortened version of Birkebeiner. But she could tell you all the history you want to know about the American Birkebeiner and what an incredible man her dad was. But we're so pleased to have all 3 of you here tonight. It's really special. So, Jackie is first time I've met her in person, so it's really, really awesome.
Well, thank you for all the work you put on the history. That is so important to keep that alive.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Because, you know, there are people doing the Berkey now that they know none of this, so this is so
Well, and
important.
see, my point is that people know what the Berkey is, but they don't know what the Birkebeiner is. And that is a big, big problem.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah. So there are many, so one of the reasons I did the book was to capture personal stories like Jackie and Frances and Steve and Carl Andreessen and Ernie St. Germain. That was the 60+ interviews was really to make the book a story not only about a race but about the people who made the race special and continue to make it special. So I really spent time talking to as many people as I could who go way back to the start but also involved in the race even today. So you see the title of the book, The Nation's Greatest Ski Marathon. It's like, that's a pretty bold statement in a way. I haven't had anybody come up to me and say, hey, you know, the race out in Vermont is better than this. I don't think anybody would argue that title is too much. The Berkey from its start was I believe, the first ski marathon in the U.S. post-1960. There were a couple pre-1960 that started and faded, but the Birkie is the oldest marathon in the country, as far as I can tell. It's got all these great things going for it. It's iconic trail, small town atmosphere. It's this reunion on snow of friends and family. There's one family, there's 5 generations of family who've done this race. It's the Norwegian heritage. Tony Wise is part Norwegian. His grandmother was from Norway. It's patterned after the Norwegian race. Telemark is a region in Norway. That's why it's called Telemark Lodge. Tony really wanted to be a Norwegian themed race. That's special in its own way. There are songs written about the Birkie, and that's in the book. Birkie Fever song, which is one of my favorite songs. The amazing energy around the race. It was just, maybe more than anything, it's the celebration of snow and winter 1 week out of the year. It's that time of year when most of us, struggle even to get out of our house to take the garbage can out to the street. It's like, oh, it's so cold, I don't want to get out. Here are thousands of people that get out and ski all winter, and they look forward to this week every year because they love the snow. They want to be out there skiing. They love the beauty of the sport and the celebration of that sport, and winter and Wisconsin all comes together Birkie Week. It's really a special thing to be part of. Then there's volunteers that without them the race wouldn't even be possible. Up to 2,000 volunteers who show up and stand at a food station in the woods for 8 hours. They're out there longer than the skiers. Amazing. They do it for nothing. So, excited to say my book has won an award from the International Skiing History Association. They honor books about skiing of all types, alpine, cross-country, snowboarding, whatever. And I received an award that I get to pick up in Utah this spring, and so I feel really good about how the book's turned out. If you get a chance to read it, I'd be really excited, but I would love to answer your questions too. Really, it was an honor for me to do it and to get to meet people like Jackie and Steve and Francis and so many people involved in an event that I've loved over the years, and now got a chance to be the person to chronicle its history. So I couldn't be happier to be part of it and help preserve this history of, to me, one of the great events in American sports. It's become that, and all thanks to somebody like Tony who helped get it going, and people like Jackie and Steve who were there and supported it all these years. So, yes, questions?
I think the Birch leggings was the reason that helped keep this race going. Maybe you should explain to people what that is.
Yeah, so this purple bib, so when you ski 20 races, you get purple bib, and you're officially a member of the Birch Leggings Club. So basically you get a purple bib from that point on, and the rest of the time you ski. Unless you reach, for example, 30 Birkies, then you're considered an uber legger, and then you get a black bib. And I think maybe even something beyond that. But yeah, the Birch Leggings Club was formed by veterans of the Birkie, longtime veterans, and Steve is involved in the Birch Leggings Club a lot. But they're there to kind of act as like a second benevolent foundation for the Birkie. They help raise money to support skiing. They help support skiers. They inspire skiers to continue to do the race. And having that group there has really helped support the Birkie among longtime skiers. And then it encourages you to keep going. You get an award at 10 years, but for many people, it's like, if you've done 10, you're thinking, I want to do 20 and get that purple bib and be part of the Birch Leggings Club. It's a cool thing to say to have done that many Birkies, and it's a special thing. I know you got a question back there earlier.
I was just wondering what was the beginning of the Moravassil movement? When did that start?
The one in Minnesota?
Yeah.
Interesting question. It started the day after the Birkie in 1973.
Oh, really?
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't realize that till I started doing the research on the race.
So that's got a pretty long history as well.
Yeah, 1973 also, right?
Okay.
It's not as big as the Birkie, but the first year it was actually close to 100 skiers, and the Birkie had, again, only 35. So.
It seems to me, I started skiing in the early 90s. It seems like both events were somewhat similar around that time as far as size.
Correct. They were, I think, early on, right. And actually, the Birkie and the Mora realized at some point they were going to be held on the same weekend that first year, and neither one of them wanted to give up that weekend, so they decided one would go Saturday and one would go Sunday. So, yeah, so it goes back exactly to the same time. And the Moro Vasaloppet is patterned after the Swedish Vasaloppet in Sweden, which I think is still the largest in the world. It always was, and I believe it still is the largest ski marathon in the world. Yeah. So, yes, good question.
In terms of hospitality, you mentioned there are around 12,000 skiers. Where
Yes.
do they stay? Do they stay in town? I'm
Yeah.
very curious about that. Or do they travel 4 or 5 hours just for that day?
Yeah, somebody asked me that question one other time too, and it's like, how do these two little towns, Cable and Hayward, which total about 3,000 people, host all of those people? And it is a bit of a dance on how they do it. So there's several options. Virtually every hotel is completely full. I mean, they all are full. Everybody who has cabins up there, a lot of their friends will stay with them at their cabins when they ski. Lots and lots of cabins up there. There are people who rent their houses and cabins for the weekend, or they will host international skiers. If the Birkie gets a call from 5 Norwegian skiers, for example, and those Norwegian skiers have no place to stay, they have some host families that say, we've got 3 bedrooms, you can use our bedrooms and just stay with us. So there've been a lot of international friendships that have formed that way and gone on for years. There's typically a school gym that you can bed down in for about $10-15. I've done that a few times. I don't want to do it again. It's kind of a wild experience. You just basically on the gym floor with like 60 or 80 other skiers on a sleeping bag on the gym floor. But sometimes that's your only option. There are some skiers who commute maybe an hour or 2 to the race. If somewhat, Duluth, for example, skiers will probably come down. Rice Lake, is an hour away from Hayward. A lot of times those skiers will probably drive up for the day. But yeah, it's a pretty incredible event that these two small towns pull off, just in terms of hospitality alone. Yes, Jackie?
I was gonna say, some of my family didn't like this, but 2 families rented a Winnebago. Sylvie Olson, who was a really good skier, and she was one of the earlier ones, that we stayed in this Winnebago with, 4 adults and 5 children. And that was quite the shell. But people do park in, the parking lot in their vans, and I bet people do sleep in their cars too, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And I did that one year myself.
Yeah.
I slept in the back of my minivan outside of Telmark Lodge, got up in the morning, and I wasn't the only one. And you went inside and warmed up and got your ski stuff on. Yeah, you just,
Do what you can.
yeah. Now there's a number of people. I think that Francis probably knows this, but I think the Telmark parking lot used to be full of people sleeping in their vehicles before the race. I don't think so much anymore, but yeah. Yeah, other
Well, I
questions?
think now with all the vans, people are doing van life.
Yeah,
I think there is some of that happening.
yeah.
What you have time with?
Yeah, I know, I've heard one other story. It was one of Francis's friends named Don Hughes, and they were a couple of, I believe it was German skiers who had rented an RV, and it was gonna be quite a bit below zero, and the RV was not insulated. They were probably gonna freeze, so Donna Hughes invited these skiers into her house to make sure they were gonna make it through the weekend. But yeah, it's just an incredible event to be part of, to see it, even to spectate. It's really fun. We have, outside of Steve, I know, who's done a lot of Birkies. We have some others here who have finished a number of Birkies. Several of you, okay. Birch Lakers, more than 20? Okay, one Birch Laker here. How many?
26, I think.
26.
One.
And you're skiing this year too? Oh, congratulations. Well, hopefully it's a good day for you. Yeah. So,
Everything you said is true.
good. Yeah, so again, five chapters that kind of chronologically cover the race, and then 5 other chapters, Birkie Fever, a chapter on the trail, how Tony conceived it and made it happen, chapter on the first race, a chapter just about Tony Wise, one of my favorite chapters in the book, and who he was, how he came to be the person who started this race, and all these other great things, and really did achieve his dream. He helped put Hayward on the map. He created a winter sports season that up to that point did not exist in Hayward. And if any of you remember the story of Telemark Alpine, it was the place to be in the 50s and 60s to alpine ski. And people went there just to hang out and enjoy the social scene, and maybe not even to ski. It was such a popular place. He was a very successful businessman. He did so many things for the Hayward and Cable area that are still making that area successful and prosperous today. Mountain biking trails. The Birkie Trail is used for many, many things. It's not just the Birkie, it's used for mountain biking, it's used for hiking and running. Multiple ski races are held throughout the year there. The pre-Birkie this weekend, which is a race to help people train for the Birkie, will be on the Birkie Trail this weekend. It's become an incredible draw for the Hayward Cable area, along with snowmobiling, I might add. Yeah, another question.
Yes. Just listening and hearing about your guys, these are very inspiring characters. And maybe that's a question for you as well. What do you think was one of the biggest hurdles you encountered when you created the Birkie?
Yeah, maybe Francis can answer too. You wanna go first, Francis?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, there's a lot of jealousy in small towns, so people were very jealous of him and his success, so, when he wanted to do something, there'd always be some naysayers. And one of the things Jerry talked about, the Birkebeiner Foundation raising blah, 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 after we lost him in the bankruptcy. Guess how many of the local businesses gave him money to support the Birkebeiner throughout his tenure there? None. They took the money from, they received immense profits from the race, and they just took it. The same thing with the Lumberjack World Championships. He did that all on his own. We didn't take family vacations. All that money got poured back into those events. And it's not bitterness on my part. It's just the way it was. But the foundation takes great credit for what they've done, but they forget that, no money went into his coffers. This was all, and that obviously contributed to the bankruptcy.
Thank you for sharing this.
Thanks.
Yeah, Tony, I think, was incredible in terms of his vision. In fact, on his gravestone, it says "Man of Vision," and you don't get too many people like that in the world. People who can see years beyond and help that vision come true. I mean, most people can, we can barely see the next week and paying our bills and all of that, but Tony could see into the future somehow. He could envision the World Lumberjack Championships. He bought that event from somebody in Escanaba, Michigan. It was a really small event. He brought it to Hayward, and suddenly ABC World of Sports was covering the World Lumberjack Championships in Hayward in the early 1960s. With Kurt Gowdy and Bob Uecker showed up and became on national television. This little event, this Lumberjack Championships in Little Hayward, Wisconsin. I mean, he had incredible vision to the things that he thought of and he made come true. He just made it happen. That first race, very few people after the first race thought that the Birkie was going to be something big. In fact, there's a quote in there from a young man, the only guy who did not finish the first Birkie. I tracked him down and found, his story about why he didn't finish, and he crashed into a tree and had to pull off the course. And he said, two of his quotes I just love. One of them, he said, well, the people who skied that day were hippies, lunatics, and people from Minnesota. Which I just love that. I mean, yeah, it was kind of a mishmash of people. I mean, the very first Birkebeiner was not, most people had never skied that far. Some of those people had hardly ever skied in their life. They had never been on the trail. They didn't know where they were going. I mean, the trail was, the track that year was set by a guy with a snowmobile pulling two people behind him on alpine skis to set in two parallel tracks. That's how the track was set the first year. And this young man who didn't finish the first Birkie, I had the quote at the end of that first race chapter that says, he says, when I left that day, he says, I don't remember anybody saying, this is the start of something big. And I don't think people did. But there was one person who did, and that was Anthony Wise. He believed it was gonna grow and it was gonna become something huge. And so that's what vision does for you. You believe in yourself, you have confidence, and you make things happen. Yes, Jack?
You know, to this day, I still can't remember how we found out about the Berkey. I mean, was there an application in the paper? I mean, how?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
They did send out some notices to the media, and there were some flyers that were posted at ski shops, some posters. I have a picture from Duncan McLean, the guy who won the Cord Lopet that year. First person ever to cross the Berkey finish line. He sent me a copy of the early hand-drawn poster about the race. I think some of those were, again, posted up at ski shops in Duluth and maybe in Minneapolis, just around. And you're right, I think there were some notices in the Sawyer County Record, maybe some other newspapers. They did have a publicist who helped get some word out. But again, only 35 skiers in the main race, not too many people were really interested in cross-country skiing at that point. In fact, Tony had a great quote at one point. He says, back at that time, if you gave somebody a pair of cross-country skis, they'd probably give them back to you. 'Cause very few people ski. It's really true. We think of the sport as so popular today, but there really weren't even trails. I mean, groomed ski trails much of any kind back then. Not much for grooming at all, so. Good question?
Yeah, I just, a statement of yours in the book is it's like a personal Olympic moment. And when I think about that, then I look on Facebook and there's this gentleman that says, I've skied 3, but you know what, I finished one of them. So I think what the statement is how much of a challenge that you've driven home to us that it is to do it.
It is, yeah. You think of, again, a World Cup level course in terms of the elevation changes and the distance. But then you take the average person that, is maybe 50, 60 years old, 40 years old, maybe they're not in great shape. Maybe they've had injuries, whatever. That's a real challenge to ski 30 miles, not only on that course, but depending on your physical condition. So it's truly a personal challenge to get to the finish line. And every year when I would start the race, I would have maybe a bunch of goals, like I want to improve my time a little bit, whatever. But to me, the main thing was just finish the race, whatever it takes. If you fall and break a pole, get back up, get a substitute pole, whatever. Finish the race. There's some great stories in the Berkey Fever chapter about that. Some of the people who struggled with various issues to get to the finish line, but they were not going to give up. They were going to get to the finish line one way or another. And I'm sure Steve and Jackie probably had days when they were out there thinking, I don't know if I can do it. My knee is bad, whatever. But yeah, that's the beauty of it is you
Well,
fight through it.
one thing, Jerry, I want to point out is that Jerry has done such extensive research and through the University of Wisconsin archives and other places that he's uncovered things that I didn't know from my own experiences with my dad. So, this book is truly an amazing book in that it captures a lot of things that would otherwise have been lost, and that is a huge deal.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah.
One thing that goes along with your history is the North Star Ski Club, which was a big ski club in the Twin Cities, not big, but a ski club that kind of got started at the time of the Berkey. And they had their own race, it was called the BJC, Victoria Jonathan Chaska, that's where the trail opened. And that went for a while, and then it was so late in the season and we didn't have any snow, so it was canceled, for after some years. But that was in conjunction with the Berkey, so, things are going on down here that probably fed people into the Berkey because, well, if I could ski 10 kilometers, I could ski 30 miles.
Sure. And you were a member of that ski club,
Yeah.
I believe, right?
And we had a house out in Chaska, that was kind of our clubhouse, until they started building apartments and everything there, so. There was a lot of skiing going on, and some old timers, Norm Oakvig, I don't know if that name rings a bell with you, but he was an old skier, and,
Yeah.
Jenny McQuetting kind of looked up to those people as part of founders of the whole thing.
In fact, one of the people that I interviewed, Jerry Berard, who was the first general manager at Telemark, he was telling me, he said, he had heard that skiing was really taking off in the Twin Cities, cross country. And he said, I told Tony, he said, maybe we should look into this about adding some cross country trails at Telemark. Because like the North Star Club had this race, and I think the one year the North Star Club had over 900 skiers
Yeah.
in one of those early races. And yeah, so it was a sure sign that the sport was really starting to take off, and the ski sales really took off from like 69 to 73 in the US. So Tony got on the front edge of, leading edge of this change in the industry. Interestingly, I ran across the original brochure that Tony had created in 1947 when the Telemark Alpine opened up. And it said on that brochure that he had cross-country ski trails there, and he never built them, as far as we know. So
Well, you could go back and, there were a few places you could.
you could ski.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but it it was never really advertised after that, like,
No.
it was something you would do, but there it was all alpine, so. But yeah, so I think he knew about the sport and knew that it, what would, you know, that it was probably a good sport for the area, but there was just so little interest in it in 1947 or even in the ensuing years. So,
And one more comment, Jerry,
Yeah.
sorry to hog this up, but I really think that Ben Hoff has done more for the Birkebeiner and for Telemark than any director since my dad.
yeah,
He's also the only, you know, head of the world Lopet since my dad. And he is making pioneering efforts to get silent sports, just to make Telemark the center for silent sports really in the United States. He's done an amazing job, and if you haven't been up there to see some of the more recent editions, you should go, because it is absolutely incredible what he has done, and
yeah,
it has not been easy.
I mean, I agree. I think Ben is the spitting image of Tony in a lot of ways. He just lots of energy, lots of ideas, and he just charges ahead, and has some vision. And you don't get people like that often. That's why I think the Berkey now look back to all the years I've been involved in, I think the Berkey now is better than it's ever been. In terms of a race experience, the strength of the organization, the beauty of the course, the way it's operated and run, everything about it has gotten better in the last decade since Ben's been there. So it's great to see, because I've been a part of races that have fizzled over the years, and the Berkey has gotten better, and that's an amazing thing in this day and age to keep that interest high. And entry fees have gone from $7 in 1973 to $285 right now, if you wanted to enter at the last minute. But why do people pay $285? Because they love the Berkey. And it's just an incredible one-day experience that you don't forget year after year. And you know, you go with what the market will bear, and people will pay that much because it's become a world-class, first-class event. So it truly is. So be happy to hang around and answer more questions if you want. I've got some books over there to sign. If you want to buy one, I'd be happy to sign it for you. But again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the leaders.